Chapter 181. Utatane Koharu asks for help. Last year, the Sand Ninja Village's infiltration into the Land of Fire had turned into a long, grinding campaign before Konoha finally crushed them. It wasn't only that the Sand struck while Konoha was off guard, the Sand's real advantage was their tactics. They sent large numbers of shinobi, scattering their attacks across many fronts so that Konoha couldn't encircle them easily. More importantly, the Land of Fire offered countless places to hide and countless things to destroy. That made the search and suppression a nightmare. The Land of Wind was different. There were very few valuable targets, villages, oases, and because of that, attackers had to hit the same limited list of places. That made it much easier for the Sand to track and respond. When had being poor and barren become an advantage? Homura Mitokado could only shake his head in disbelief. But this was the Land of Wind. You accepted what you had. Historically, Iwagakure and Kirigakure had come into the Land of Wind to harass the Sand, wandering in and out to cause trouble, but rarely gaining anything. You couldn't sack a pile of sand and carry it away, after all. So when Utatane Koharu and the others suddenly stopped targeting the remaining sites and turned north, Homura and everyone else were baffled. Jingi, who had arrived in the Land of Bears a step ahead and was watching from a quiet spot, stared at the change in their course. If Koharu and Homura were heading into the Land of Bears, the Sand's pursuers would almost certainly follow. The Land of Wind had few hiding places. The Land of Bears was another story. Once inside that terrain, with its complex relief, dense forests, and pockets of poisonous gas, it would be easy to fight a protracted, chaotic campaign. Jingi cursed inwardly. The Land of Bears would become a battlefield sooner than he'd hoped. All at once, he decided to move. Better to head to the Land of Rivers early and get ahead of events. Let Koharu and Homura tie up the Sand's pursuers in the Land of Bears for now. The Bears could fend off the worst of the fighting between the two great villages. If the third Hokage sent reinforcements, however, the Land of Bears might still turn into a second Land of Rain. That was an ugly possibility. Jingi packed and prepared to leave after nightfall. He left a flying puppet behind to keep watching movement in the bears and climbed onto the giant eagle puppet for a night flight toward the rivers. At that height and in the dark, few would notice a giant eagle silhouette against the stars, and the puppet's speed covered the border in a matter of hours. Back in Konoha, the third Hokage's frustration was boiling over. His two elderly allies, Utatane Koharu and Homura Mitokado, were reporting constant updates from the field, and every message made the problem clearer. Causing trouble inside the Land of Wind was frightfully costly. Strike one of the few valuable targets, and you'd be reported and pursued. The Land of Wind's scarcity of targets made every action obvious. Unlike the Land of Fire, where the Sand could strike here and there and force Konoha to chase shadows, the Wind's paucity of targets meant every deed led directly to counterattack. He set down the sealing scroll in his hands, rubbed his temples, and muttered in exasperation. Is there still no word from Hyuga Jingi? Since the team split up, Jingi had gone quiet. No further messages had come from him, and no sealing scrolls or letters had reached the Intelligence Bureau. The messenger from Intelligence shook his head. Jingi hadn't sent anything. By contrast, Koharu and Homura were sending reports almost daily, and they were fortunate to have team members under contract with messenger hawks, so some information could still get through. The third Hokage wasn't worried about Jingi's safety so much as the mission's balance. If Jingi had finished his objectives while Koharu and Homura had only managed half of theirs, it would be humiliating. Jingi had a reputation for speaking his mind, and he wouldn't mince words if he thought Konoha had been outdone. Still, rescue came first. The two elders were too important to risk losing in the Land of Wind. Inform the Jonin commander, the third Hokage ordered. Send a contingent into the Land of Bears to support the two elders. Bring them back. No exceptions. Choosing the size of the reinforcement was a difficult calculation. Too few, and it wouldn't succeed. Too many, and the Land of Bears would be dragged into an all-out war, turning it into a new battlefield, hardly fair to the Bears. But fairness would not stop Konoha or the Sand from pursuing their goals. If it weren't for the threat that Iwagakure might stir up broader conflict, The Sand might have been tempted to invade and plunder the land of bears outright to fill their shortages. Meanwhile, under cover of night, Jingi's giant eagle puppet carried him south and then east, skirting the border to reach the land of rivers. The devastation he passed as he crossed into River's territory was stark. The full-scale war between Konoha and the Sand had swept across vast swaths of the region. Towns and fields lay ruined. Smoke still rose from many places. Only the daimyo's residence had remained untouched. No matter how fierce the fighting became, both Konoha and the Sand had observed one line they would not cross: the Lord's compound. If the war reached the daimyo's residence, the consequences would be immediate and severe. The third Kazekage and the third Hokage would both receive angry warnings from their respective rulers. Fight if you must, make a scene if you must, but do not joke about the daimyo. Chapter 182, The One with Green Hair. Is that Yikang? Outside the daimyo's residence, everyone could fight and quarrel as they pleased. What was strictly forbidden was dragging war into the daimyo's residence itself. That was the unwritten bottom line every daimyo in every nation observed. Every village observed it too. Look at the Sand Ninja village. They had pillaged nearly the entire land of rain, yet they had deliberately left the daimyo's residence untouched. It wasn't that they lacked the will, far from it. The daimyo's residence was the wealthiest, most tempting target in the land of rain, but once a village touched it, that village would immediately become the public enemy of the entire ninja world. Even the land of Wind's daimyo wouldn't tolerate such a breach. The land of rivers was littered with the scars of conflict. In places, there were still unburied corpses left in the wilderness. Because of the war, many civilians had fled toward the daimyo's residence, seeing it as the only place offering any semblance of safety. The land of rivers was larger than the land of rain and offered more room to escape. Even a prolonged war there would not necessarily make things as desperate as in the land of rain. The land of rain, by contrast, was devastated. Its small territory had been torn apart for over a year. Its population had been decimated, and many civilians had fled to neighboring countries. When the fighting finally died down, the land of rain's population had collapsed to less than half what it had been. On the road toward the land of rivers camp, Jingi made a sudden stop. Ahead, a squad from Sand Ninja Village marched through the Black Forest. One figure in that squad caught his eye because of an unusual hair color. Konoha was known for its eccentric hair colors, the most varied of any village, so a stranger could hardly be surprised by odd dyes: black, blonde, white, brown, and the later, rarer reds like Kushina's. There were even Konoha folk with darker red mixed with black like Nagato, and then there were the exceptional burgundy reds that looked bright enough to be stained by blood. Jingi had seen those colors before. But bright green? Never. The woman in the squad wore flaming green hair tied in a topknot. It was an odd look, and it made Jingi's mind ping with possibility. Green-haired ninjas were extremely rare. Combine the hair with the person's apparent age and the fact she was from the Sand, and the identity seemed to fall into place. Yikang, Sand Village's beauty, the wielder of the coveted Scorch Release. A woman of high status and power at the village, one of the few who could have contended with Rasa for the fourth Kazekage position. Her death had been a sore subject, sold out by Rasa, duped into going to the Mist Village, ambushed there, killed, and then used for the Mist's experiments. If she were alive here now, Jingi's curiosity sharpened. He made the giant eagle puppet halt. With a flick of a sign, the sealing scroll he'd carried dropped to the ground. Dozens of figures materialized in the obsidian gloom of the forest. Puppets with glowing green eyes flowed like a living tide between the trees, moving toward the Sand Squad in silent, unerring formation. The squad's reconnaissance ninja cried out, voice tight with fear. "Stop! Captain! Enemies! Behind us! They're moving too fast! Coming straight at us!" The captain swore. "How could enemies appear behind us? How did you miss them?" The trail showed nothing. There were no signs of movement along the path. The scout protested defensively. "Shut up! Prepare for battle. Yikang, if things go south, take Toomey and retreat immediately." "I'll stay and cover the withdrawal," Yikang said. The captain snapped back, angry and raw with responsibility. "I'm the captain. Obey my orders." Yikang's Scorch Release made her invaluable. Toomey, their reconnaissance ninja, was one of the village's best scouts. The captain did not want to lose either of them. Before Ye Kang could argue further, the squad found itself completely surrounded. The puppets formed a ring. Their green-lit eyes watched with mechanical stillness. Tumi's voice trembled. They don't feel like living things. To anyone trained in sensing chakra, the difference between living beings and puppets was obvious. Puppets didn't have the faint throb of chakra a living body gave off. Yet these puppets were not the crude, pre-programmed automatons Sand specialized in. The squad's members were perplexed. Puppets weren't the Sand Village's signature, and there should have been a puppeteer somewhere, pulling chakra threads to animate them. Everyone's eyes flicked to Tumi. "I can't sense any puppeteer," Tumi choked out. "There are no chakra threads at all. These puppets are moving on their own." Puppet control usually required a puppeteer to project chakra through threads or to be in close proximity. Rigid, disposable constructs could move on preset mechanical tracks, but true combat puppets needed a puppeteer's subtle control. These puppets were untethered, independently mobile. That realization chilled the captain. "Ye Kang," he said in a strained, pleading voice, "these puppets, if they don't require a puppeteer, this is important intelligence for the village. Take Tumi and run. Send word back to camp. Tell Grandma Chio, if you can't bring Tumi, then save yourself." "Understood," Ye Kang said reluctantly. Jingi, watching through the eagle puppet's eyes, couldn't help but grin. Hadn't Grandma Chio already made this threat public? The captain's urgent command made it clear the squad hadn't received or hadn't heeded the warning. "Go," the captain barked, engaging the nearest puppets with the last standing members of the squad to buy time. Ye Kang gritted her teeth, scooped Tumi into her arms, and launched a fireball. The orange-red sphere struck a puppet squarely. Over half its body seared and crumpled to the ground. For a brief heartbeat, it seemed the danger was breaking. Ye Kang braced, ready to sprint away with Tumi. The discarded puppet's body suddenly flared with a sickening green light. An omen flashed through Ye Kang's mind. There was no time to prepare. The puppet detonated without warning. The explosion ripped through the clearing, and Ye Kang, clutching Tumi, was caught in the blast. Chapter 183. What Happened to the Princess of Konoha? Boom! With a thunderous blast, Ye Kang and the puppet she held were torn apart. The sudden explosion froze the patrol captain and his teammate in place. Nobody had expected the destroyed puppet to detonate. Ye Kang, having borne the full force of the blast at close range, was hurled a long distance and slammed into the ground. Her head rang. She didn't even have time to figure out what had happened. Two dark figures hurried forward. A heavy blow to the back of her head blacked her vision. She coughed up blood and collapsed, unconscious. Target acquired. Mission complete. One of the puppets scooped Ye Kang up and withdrew at once. The others stopped attacking and retreated into the trees, following their master. They didn't finish them off? Watching the orderly puppets vanish into the forest, the captain stood dazed for a long moment, weapon still in hand. Finally, he came to himself. Oh no, they kidnapped Ye Kang. The enemy's objective had never been the squad. It had been Ye Kang all along. Losing a single puppet while capturing Ye Kang was a worthwhile trade for them. And the sealing scroll they used, those were expensive and not handed out lightly. Whoever had orchestrated the attack had calculated the cost and decided it was worth it. Through the smoke, the puppets' silhouettes retreated. The captain, trying to make sense of it, realized how difficult holding a captive like Ye Kang would be. A ninja of her skill couldn't simply be brainwashed. Keeping her loyal or ensuring she stayed would take real effort. That effort would likely require cooperation from another village, perhaps the Sand. Would the Sand actually abandon Ye Kang? The captain grimly thought it possible. One person's fate, alive or dead, might not change the course of a larger plan. A short while later, all the puppets returned to the rendezvous except for the one Ye Kang had set ablaze before it self-destructed. In fact, Ye Kang had done much of the work herself. Had she not burned that puppet and caused its self-destruction, she wouldn't have been blown away and captured. When intelligence and preparation tipped the scales, these self-destruct mechanisms were terrifyingly effective. After regrouping, Jingi cradled Ye Kang with one hand and mounted the giant eagle puppet, steering them toward Konoha's encampment in the Land of Rivers. He deliberately kept his pace measured. At daybreak, Jingi paused a few miles outside the camp to avoid needless suspicion. He stowed the giant eagle puppet and, carrying Ye Kang, walked slowly toward the perimeter. "Who goes there?" a patrol challenged. "Ambu, Hyuga Jingi," he replied. "Lord Jingi?" The patrol members exchanged looks. The captain stepped forward and bowed a few paces. "Lord Jingi, please show your ninja identification." Passing the perimeter required the patrol's clearance. Showing ID was the most basic procedure. Jingi produced his identification and tossed it to them. The patrol captain caught it, held it to a torchlight, and examined it closely before returning it to him. "Sir, to confirm your identity, we'll need someone who knows you to come and identify you. Please understand." "That strict?" Jingi asked, a little surprised. At the Rainland front lines, the checks hadn't been so thorough. Why were they tighter here, in the Land of Rivers? "We had infiltrations," the captain explained. "Enemy agents came in disguised as our people. After that, Lady Tsunade and Lord Orochimaru tightened security." "I see," Jingi nodded. It made sense. Those returning directly to the camp could use the daily code they'd been given when they left. But for anyone new coming in, even someone with ID, an on-site confirmation was necessary. No exceptions, not even for the Hokage. Tsunade and Orochimaru weren't people to hand-wave procedure. "Who's commanding operations here now?" Jingi asked. The captain seemed surprised by the question. He glanced around, lowered his voice, and said, "Lord Orochimaru, Lady Tsunade felt the previous commander was incompetent, so she put Lord Orochimaru in charge." Jingi was silent for a beat. Seizing authority, of course that would be something Tsunade and Orochimaru would do. With her backing, Orochimaru had stepped forward, and the former commander had been sidelined. The third Hokage hadn't objected, apparently. Jingi let himself feel a brief, if cynical, pang of sympathy for the unlucky man. Not long after, the man in charge of identification appeared. Jingi recognized him. They had met often at the Land of Rain camp. "Goro, long time no see." Goro gave an awkward laugh and scratched his head. "I didn't expect to see you at the Land of Rivers camp. Are you staying for a while, Lord?" After sensing Jingi's chakra and confirming it was really him, Goro nodded to the patrol. The patrol stepped back and let them pass. Goro then led Jingi into the camp. "Sort of," Jingi answered quietly. "Tsunade Hime said she was too tired and asked me to take over for a while. You know how our Konoha princess can be." "What about the Konoha princess?" Goro asked. "Cough, of course, she's very righteous." Jingi hastily changed his tone the moment Tsunade's voice cut in. "Why are you here too? Aren't you busy?" Tsunade strode up, having hurried over when she heard the news. She had been ready to rest, but the moment she learned Jingi was at the camp, she intervened. "Do I look busy?" Jingi gave her a pointed look. Tsunade tossed him a glare that said he should know better, then turned to Goro. "You can go back to your duties. I'll handle this." "Yes, Lady Tsunade," Goro answered, giving Jingi an appraising look before slipping away. "Is it really that bad?" Jingi thought wryly. Tsunade wouldn't eat him alive. Still, she had a way of making small moments feel larger than they needed to be. "Has the war situation changed?" Tsunade asked as she and Jingi walked side by side toward the medical department. Chapter 184. The Two Elders and Advisors? "Oh, they're being hunted, same as always." Tsunade frowned. "A full-scale war doesn't end in a day or two. If nothing unexpected happens, this could drag on for a year or two." "Oh, and this is..." Jingi was holding someone face down in one arm, keeping her features out of sight. Ye Kang. He tilted her up just enough for Tsunade to see her face. "A genius from the Sand Village with a rare bloodline ability. You know her. Scorching Release Ye Kang." Konoha had been at war with the Sand Village, and Tsunade had learned the names of the enemy's important figures. "Intel said she's powerful and has caused Konoha a lot of trouble. How did you capture her?" Noting Ye Kang was stirring, Jingi fished out his restraints and tied her before she woke. The Konoha camp was full of wooden structures, and Ye Kang's scorching release would have been dangerous around so much timber. Once she was secured, Jingi explained, "I ran into her in the Land of Rivers. She looked like she was on a mission. I caught her after sacrificing a puppet." He gave a short account of how the girl had attacked his puppet with scorching release and tried to flee, only to be trapped by the puppet's self-destruction. Tsunade could only stare in a mix of pity and disbelief. Yeikang had been unlucky. If she hadn't been so desperate to break through alongside her people, she might never have stumbled into the puppet's detonator. Sacrificing one puppet to capture Yeikang felt like a bargain in Jingi's favor. "Wait, what are you doing? Slow down." Tsunade snapped suddenly, dragging Jingi toward her quarters as soon as they reached the camp. Jingi hurried to keep up, bewildered. "Get on with it. I've been eating rations so long, I'm turning into one," she grumbled, and then produced a roast leg of meat so large it dwarfed a person, dumping it on the table with a hungry look. Jingi blinked. So that was why she'd been agitated, over food. He wiped sweat from his temple, but couldn't resist a retort. "In a camp this size, you couldn't get someone else to roast it?" "I don't want Orochimaru's roasting," Tsunade said flatly. "He handles corpses all day. I don't want to eat his cooking, and I don't want to bother others either." She straightened her face and spoke with earnest seriousness. "I have privileges here, but I shouldn't make unreasonable requests just for food." Given her status, she could have had chefs assigned immediately, but Tsunade preferred not to impose. Among the among the 3 former Sannin, Tsunade had the strongest sense of duty to the village. Jiraiya cared too, but he was impulsive and obsessed with prophecies. Orochimaru, well, when he felt the village mattered, he could single-handedly infiltrate the cloud and provoke beasts. When he didn't, he had no qualms about abandoning it. Jingi took his tools out and began to skin the leg with practiced speed. "How long do you plan to stay in the village this time?" "A few months, I think." They worked together, Tsunade fetching firewood, Jingi preparing the meat. It had been dry weather in the land of rivers. The camp's fires went well. As the wood caught, Tsunade let out a small sigh. "Once I leave, you'll stay in the medical department. Analyze poisons, develop antidotes. You don't need to take on anything else." Jingi had managed the camp in the Land of Rain and had been indispensable in the demigod battle. His contributions were enormous, even if some didn't acknowledge them. Tsunade wouldn't force him into needless toil. "That's fine," he said, yawning as he washed and marinated the meat. "I've gotten used to being lazy in the village. If you make me busy, I might not manage." No matter what you did, some people would never appreciate it, he thought. Better to keep appearances and not exhaust yourself. He pulled a few utensils from his sealing scroll. A pair of knives and his eating gear always went with him, and placed the venison on the grill. The meat sizzled, Tsunade's mouth watered, but she changed the subject to hide it. "By the way, your mission, what about those 2 elders and advisors?" "My mission's done." Jingi glanced north with a small self-satisfied smile. "As for those 2 old geezers, bad luck. They're being chased by the 3rd Kazekage." "Chased? Are you sure?" Tsunade choked, coughing in surprise. "My puppet's been following them." Jingi split off part of his consciousness and viewed the scene through his puppet's eyes. On the northern border of the Land of Wind, Utane Koharu and Homura Mitokado were fleeing desperately toward the Land of Bears. Fewer than 10 shinobi remained with them now. Most of those who had left Konoha had already fallen to the 3rd Kazekage. Those sacrifices, however, had bought the 2 advisors time and a chance to survive. Orochimaru's voice cut in as he arrived at the camp. He'd come as soon as he learned Jingi was here. Jingi only smiled and said nothing. Chapter 185. Something is wrong with Orochimaru. Tsunade's expression changed and she sighed helplessly. "Those 2 from the Elder Council are being chased by the 3rd Kazekage." Orochimaru's eyes brightened. "Is that so?" His pupils narrowed in a way Jingi had come to recognize since Orochimaru's arrival at the front, an odd, hungry gleam that told Jingi the Snake Man had been up to strange experiments. The look in his eyes was proof enough. It wouldn't surprise Jingi if Orochimaru soon lived up to the nickname Konoha Great White Snake. "You said Jingi was on a special mission with them?" Orochimaru asked with a soft chuckle. "A revenge mission," Jingi answered without hiding anything. Last year's incident angered the daimyo. He kept pressuring the Hokage, so the Hokage arranged this op. The village wanted me to go, but I refused, so 2 elders accompanied me instead. We split up after reaching the Land of Wind. They went northwest, I went south. The village and the oasis took heavy damage, Jingi continued. The Sand Village reacted hard, so that other group is being pursued. That, in broad strokes, was the situation. Jingyi was too lazy to go into the minutiae about how the mission had ended. Things had been completed, and if anyone doubted it, they could check the reports. The pursuit of the other group was nothing to do with him. Orochimaru gave a low, contented chuckle. Up close, it sounded like his usual laugh, but the mood behind it was different, lighter, more amused. He had clashed with those two elders many times in Konoha. Now the tables might be turning. The third Hokage, Javert? Jingyi thought of the Sarutobi, wouldn't have it so easy to abandon his old comrades. If rescue became necessary, the third would go all out. Orochimaru's smile widened. It looks like the third Hokage will have to try to save them, he said. I hope the rescue doesn't turn the land of bears into a third battlefield. Tsunade rubbed her forehead. She and Orochimaru both knew the third Hokage wouldn't leave two of his own behind. A rescue could not be a token force. Too few would fail. Too many could transform the small land of bears into another battlefield. The land of rain had already become one, the land of rivers another. If the land of bears followed, Utatane Koharu and Homura Mitokado would go down in history as the elders whose rescue turned a small country into a war zone. I hope it isn't too late, Tsunade muttered. Orochimaru's smile grew broader. He had been affronted by those elders more than once back in Konoha. Now he seemed delighted at the prospect of them being in trouble. Is there still time? Tsunade asked Jingyi. Jingyi thought a moment. Depends on luck. The Sand Ninja are close, but there's a Sarutobi in the group who's contracted with several flying summons. Their communications shouldn't have been cut. If the third got wind of this, he would have sent a rescue team as soon as the Sand began their operation. If the rescue team prepped in advance, they might already be in the land of bears. If not, they could be late. So the rescue might make it, Tsunade said, shrugging off the worry. Just don't let it turn into another battlefield. Tsunade had other priorities. She had missed a decent meal. She dug into the roasted meat with relish, making no effort to keep up appearances. Even Orochimaru nodded his approval, which said a lot about how poor the camp food had been. If the Snake Man approved, things were bad. Tsunade made Jingyi promise to buy supplies when he returned. If you don't send them, I'll go on strike, she warned, tapping her fingers against her stomach. I'll get them to you, Jingyi said without much enthusiasm. It wasn't that he hadn't thought of bringing her things. Tsunade's cooking was notoriously dangerous, and handing her a trove of good ingredients would only cause trouble. Better to send ready supplies than let her get jealous by showing off her kitchen disasters. While they feasted miles away in the land of bears, Utatane Koharu and Homura Mitokado looked worn and battered. Homura was holding up, but Koharu, a medical ninja, was in rough shape. She'd been heavily targeted and had suffered several setbacks. Is the third Kazekage insane? He's chasing us without letting up, Koharu snapped. Homura stayed silent. If it were him, he might have pursued even harder than the Kazekage. Keep moving. Once we cross into the land of bears, we'll have places to hide, Homura said. In the open land of wind, there was nowhere to hide, and the Kazekage could fly down and catch them anywhere. The land of bears was different. Its terrain was treacherous, with pockets of poisonous gas and dense forest that made aerial pursuit dangerous and ambushes likely. If they could get into the bears, the third wouldn't be able to chase them alone. He'd need to wait for reinforcements and track them slowly. That would buy time for a rescue. Kazekage-sama, the land of bears is ahead, a messenger reported. Continue the pursuit, the third Kazekage snapped. Bring me their heads. We owe the villagers and the daimyo an explanation for that attack. He didn't care about trespassing as long as it wasn't into the land of earth. If it was a small country and an inconsequential village in the middle, who were they to complain? The third Kazekage ignored any objections. He intended to press the advantage and make an example. That said, he wasn't reckless. He knew entering the land of bears alone was risky. He would wait for the main force to arrive before pushing deeper. Back at the Konoha camp, Tsunade lay sprawled on a bed, content and unashamed as she patted her full belly. After a long belch, she turned to Jingyi, who sat nearby. I've felt Orochimaru's aura off lately, she said. Stay away from him. Don't cooperate with him on anything but puppets. Jingyi tilted his head. So you still support him grabbing power and taking control of the camp? Aren't you worried he'll cause trouble? Tsunade gave a short, dry laugh. I don't trust him, she said. But right now, the camp needs stability, and he's useful in his own way. Keeping him close is safer than letting him run loose. Just be careful. If he tries anything, you break the deal and get out. Jingi met her gaze and nodded once. He'd seen the look in Orochimaru's eyes and knew better than to treat it lightly. Around them, the small camp felt both fragile and absurdly ordinary, a quiet moment tucked between the movements of leaders and the distant thunder of armies. In the distance, Orochimaru watched the shifting map of alliances and reprisals with a smile that never reached his eyes, and for now, everyone at the camp kept their own counsel. Chapter 186, Orochimaru, you laugh in front of me? You don't even bother to hide it? Tsunade snapped, furious. It's because the person the third Hokage appointed was useless, a total idiot who got a lot of people killed. That's why I supported Orochimaru taking the position. That has nothing to do with his experiments. I can see that. Casualties have gone down a lot lately, Jingi replied. You could call Orochimaru someone drawn to darkness, but you couldn't deny his competence. He was a jack of all trades, good at a lot of things, even if he didn't reach the absolute top in every field. The nickname stuck in Jingi's head, and he couldn't help chuckling. What are you laughing at? Granny had just warned him to be careful of Orochimaru, and he was laughing. Sorry, I just remembered his title, Konoha Great White Snake, Jingi blurted, and the laugh burst out of him. Some titles were wrought with dark grandeur, others were just ridiculous. Konoha Great White Snake belonged to the latter. Even Tsunade couldn't help a small smile. Who had come up with that? Orochimaru hated that name. Any mention of it wiped the smile from his face in an instant. After a minute, Jingi forced himself to stop. Don't worry. Go back to the village. I'll keep an eye on him. I won't interfere with his experiments, but I won't babysit them either. Don't expect me to keep watch. Taking over Tsunade's role meant Jingi had to set his Anbu identity aside for the time being. He had no interest in micromanaging Orochimaru's research. That's the third Hokage's headache. If something blew up, it would be the third Hokage who had to deal with the fallout, not Hyuga Jingi. Just be careful yourself, Jingi added. Tsunade hadn't expected Jingi to watch Orochimaru. She was satisfied as long as he stayed out of things. As for Orochimaru, she couldn't control him. News of Jingi replacing Tsunade spread through the frontline camp the next day. Orochimaru even helped make the announcement. Tsunade still needed a few days to hand over the medical department properly before she could leave. The shinobi in the camp had no real objections. Jingi's record at the Land of Rain camp was known to them, and those who might have protested first had to consider whether they were strong enough to oppose the Godslayer. Godslayer-sama, a voice called. Hell, oh, Godslayer-sama, echoed another. The title Godslayer carried weight, and in the frontline camp, populated by many who had transferred from the Land of Rain, Jingi's reputation was loud and proud. In the village, the third Hokage and others tried to dampen the titles, but out here there was no suppression. Every few steps, someone would call out with admiration. Jingi hated it. His eyelids twitched whenever he heard it. Don't take it the wrong way. It's people recognizing your strength, Tsunade said, half smiling. Honestly, Godslayer sounds better than Konoha Great White Snake, she added, trying to ease his embarrassment. Orochimaru, who had been looking for Jingi, froze when he heard that. From across the path, his cold gaze locked onto Tsunade. Jingi looked up and sighed, tapping Tsunade's shoulder to make her turn. There, what was he pointing at? Tsunade turned and saw Orochimaru's expressionless face. She stiffened. Orochimaru, what a coincidence. Are you here for Jingi? I should get back to the medical department. So much to do. You two can talk. She slipped away as fast as she could. Normally, Tsunade wasn't intimidated by Orochimaru, but having just mocked his hated title, she felt a pang of guilt. Hello there, Great White Snake, Jingi called, unable to stop himself. I want to kill you all, Orochimaru thought, but he forced a tight smile instead. Jingi burst out laughing so hard he hunched over, clutching his stomach, while Orochimaru walked up and forced a dry, narrow smile. Hello, Godslayer. The title was a little theatrical, but better than being reminded of that ridiculous snake name. Orochimaru breathed deep, telling himself it was only a title. When Jingi recovered, he shifted the conversation. Did you come looking for me about something? As chief steward of the camp, Orochimaru should be busy. The Land of Rivers camp was larger than the Land of Rain camp and required constant management. I have some ideas I want to discuss. Shall we go to the command center? Orochimaru said. Jingi considered and nodded. Discussions were fine. Just don't try to rope me into any experiments, he thought. He would have none of that. It wasn't a small stigma to be labeled Orochimaru's accomplice. Walking toward the command center through the bustling camp, Jingi couldn't help but tease. I thought you came to the battlefield to risk your life, not become the camp's chief manager. Orochimaru smiled faintly. Because the person before me was useless. Aside from the third Hokage, how many people from the Sarutobi clan are actually capable? Orochimaru's assessment was accurate. The Sarutobi family's influence had been propped up beyond its actual strength. Their members were inconsistent in ability. If the previous chief had been respected enough, Orochimaru wouldn't have had the chance to push him out, even with Tsunade's help. Look at Nara Shikaku in the Land of Rain camp. Who would dare disobey him in that command center? Chapter 187, You Stab Yourself? He's a werewolf. The third Hokage stayed expressionless when the person he'd appointed was thrown out, which only confirmed what everyone had suspected. His pick had been hopeless. That left Orochimaru comfortably in the command center, issuing orders and handling the camp's affairs. Holy crap! Jingi had planned to compare the command center here in the Land of Rivers with the one he'd seen in the Land of Rain, but the sight that met him halted him mid-step. Two Orochimarus sat at the main desk, both handling paperwork. A string of profanity escaped him. He'd wondered how Orochimaru, as chief administrator, had so much time to wander, experiment, and research. He hadn't expected a pair of shadow clones doing the official work. Using shadow clones as tools and freeing himself to pursue other interests, Orochimaru's arrangement was brilliant. And the most remarkable part? No one had objected. Jingi raised a hand and gave Orochimaru a thumbs up. He didn't disturb the clones. Instead, he and the real Orochimaru sat on the edge of the table. Jingi propped his feet on the surface, leaned back, and studied Orochimaru with interest. Did you operate on yourself? Just a small experiment. Orochimaru smiled faintly, unashamed. The proof was obvious. His pupils had narrowed into vertical slits, like a cold-blooded animal's. It was a change too visible to hide. Too many had already noticed. Jingi grinned. Fine, as long as you're happy. But be careful. I don't want our chief manager turning into a giant white snake and scaring everyone one day. Orochimaru had clearly been experimenting on his body. The snake-like pupils were the clearest evidence. In the original timeline, work like this wouldn't start until after the Third Shinobi World War. Yet here, he was already conducting it during the Second. Whatever had driven him down this path remained unclear. Experimenting on myself doesn't violate the village's ban, and ordinary human life is too fragile, Orochimaru mused. Through experimentation, I've learned that natural energy is truly astonishing. I'm trying to figure out why the sacred techniques of the three great sage regions can merge chakra and natural energy so perfectly, giving incredible vitality and long life. He hadn't attempted Ryuchi Cave's sage art. The method was far too dangerous, so he'd begun targeting natural energy instead. His latest research had shifted accordingly. After Jingi developed puppets from special mud, Orochimaru lost interest in puppets made from corpses. There was no need to pursue that line when Jingi's method worked. But his research into Tenseigan chakra had never stopped, and he still had plenty of puppets for experiments. Jingi didn't object to using them so long as Orochimaru didn't hand them to the wrong people, like the village's F4. Through my studies, Orochimaru continued, growing animated, I've found that the special chakra in those puppets shares traits with the natural energy in the summons of the three great sage regions. His experiments had indeed progressed. The resemblance between Tenseigan chakra and the natural energy of the three great sage regions didn't come from nowhere. It tied back to Otsutsuki Kaguya, or more precisely, to the Ten Tails, the divine tree. The divine tree rooted in the world, absorbed its energy, bore fruit, and when Kaguya ate that fruit, she became the ancestor of chakra. All origins diverged from that point, so Orochimaru's direction made sense. but pushing the research further would be difficult. Go any deeper, and you ran into the Otsutsuki. I plan to visit the three great sage regions once the war ends, he said. There might be unexpected discoveries. Jingi yawned. That won't happen anytime soon. Wars don't end in a day or two. By the way, why won't you try Ryuchi Cave's sage art? If anyone could pull it off, Yakushi Kabuto had proven it could be done, so why not Orochimaru? Because it's extremely dangerous, Orochimaru replied with a smile. I went to Ryuchi Cave and met the White Snake Sage. I also discovered the pitfalls of that sage art. I refused. Compared with Mount Myoboku's method and the Shikotsu forests, Ryuchi Cave's sage art was a bottomless pit. You could only leap if you dared. Even if you jumped, the chance of actually gaining anything was slim. Orochimaru wasn't willing to take such a risk. Jingi sat up and sighed regretfully. That's a real shame. Sage art boosts a ninja's strength enormously. If you keep improving slowly at your current rate, Jiraiya will pull further ahead. He wasn't exaggerating. With the usual progression, both Orochimaru and Jiraiya had reached points where making dramatic gains was increasingly difficult, not from lack of effort, but because they'd hit limits. Sage art was a path of expansion. Jiraiya had taken it, Orochimaru hadn't. Over time, Jiraiya would surpass Orochimaru, and the gap would only widen. The only reason Jiraiya hadn't completely run away was that his talent wasn't exceptional. If he'd been a prodigy at entering Sage Mode early, defeating Orochimaru would have been simple. Jingi thought back to how Jiraiya had first entered Sage Mode and felt uneasy. Naruto hadn't fared much better. He only improved rapidly after gaining access to massive power-ups. Compared to Naruto and Sasuke, both were still far behind in some respects. Naruto was young. After he mastered the Flying Thunder God technique, Jingi planned to send him to the Shikotsu forest. Mount Myoboku was another story. The toads there were too good at indoctrination. Unbeknownst to Naruto, his future path was already being planned. A flicker of displeasure crossed Orochimaru's face, not aimed at Jingi, but at Jiraiya. Having been overshadowed and suppressed by Jiraiya since childhood, Orochimaru naturally didn't relish the idea of Jiraiya catching up. Still, Ryuchi Cave's sage art training was a lethal pit. If only the slug sage of Shikotsu Forest hadn't rejected him, Orochimaru might have trained there instead. Jingi, I want to ask for your help on a research project, Orochimaru said at last, after their long conversation. Chapter 188. How can you get so much money, you big dog? Ha! I thought you could hold out for a long time, Jingi laughed. I refuse, he added. I'm not interested in your research, and I won't take part in any of it. You can tinker all you like, just don't drag me into your experiments. Playful or not, experiments were no joke to Jingi. He had no intention of getting involved with Orochimaru's work. Orochimaru, unfazed by the rejection, simply continued in his calm, measured way. I want to cultivate some special creatures using your chakra, Orochimaru said. But I found chakra taken from puppets isn't enough. I need your help. Special creatures? Jingi frowned. Orochimaru reached into his robe and produced a sealing scroll. Jingi's frown deepened until it was almost a small mountain. Couldn't he have kept that thing on his person? Did Orochimaru have to produce such a revolting sight, having apparently swallowed the scroll and now spitting it out? The scroll was damp and unpleasant. Orochimaru apologized in a businesslike tone. Sorry, the items inside are extremely important, so I had to hide them somewhere I considered safe. Jingi could only stare. Fine, fair point. Your throat is enormous and apparently very accommodating. But seriously, how does one swallow a sealing scroll thicker and longer than an arm and then disgorge it on demand? He opened the scroll. Several small snakes, curled in what looked like sleep, slithered out and coiled on the table. White snakes, red snakes, black snakes. They looked almost like corpses, except for the faint, steady breaths Jingi could detect. Snake-type creatures can survive for a long time while sealed, Orochimaru explained casually. They don't die when stored in a sealing scroll. He pointed at the little snakes. These were all cultivated by special methods of mine. I found they can merge with and absorb certain energies and chakra very effectively. So you want me to use my chakra, Sage Mode chakra included, to cultivate these snakes? Jingi asked. Holy cow, what kind of monsters were these going to become? Aren't you afraid they'll burst? Orochimaru smiled with absolute confidence. After thousands of experiments, I discovered these particular snakes can handle it. That actually sounded plausible. The Akatsuki had once produced an absurdly huge snake that even overturned Turtle Island in Cloud Village, a terrifying specimen. If these snakes could be cultivated into summoning creatures, that would be huge. Jingi himself didn't need summoning animals. He thought their power was only so-so, at best equal to elite jonin, the toads and snakes of the three great sage regions. They wouldn't be of much use to him personally. But Nawaki and Little Yellow Hair could benefit enormously. If Orochimaru could cultivate these into special breeds, possibly even Kage-level summons, it would be a priceless advantage. Jingi felt temptation gnawing at him. Sigh. For my students and my brother-in-law, Hyuga Jingi is truly breaking his heart. What's the reward? Orochimaru produced another sealing scroll and set it on the table, pushing it toward Jingi. This one had been kept in his clothing, thankfully not regurgitated. 50 million ryo. That is your reward, Jingi-kun. 50 million ryo. Jingi blinked. Even though he wasn't short on funds, that amount still took him aback. Where did Orochimaru get so much money? Embezzled public funds? No, that wouldn't produce such sums. Research dividends? Probably. Jingi didn't care to probe. From Orochimaru, it was better to accept and move on. Once the money was offered and accepted, it was his. After thinking it through, Jingi agreed, but set a condition. I'll help, but I get to choose 2 of your experimental subjects to become summoning animals. One for my disciple and one for Nawaki. The slugs from Shikatsu Forest don't suit them. The toads of Mount Myoboku won't take you on unless you contract with them. The Ryuchi cave snakes were too wild and had too low an upper limit. Orochimaru's bred snakes were the most suitable choice. Orochimaru, more than willing to secure Jingi's cooperation, accepted at once. Money was one thing. Helping his disciple and his brother-in-law find proper summons was far more important to Jingi. After pocketing the payment and leaving the command center, Jingi couldn't help glancing up at the sky. How did Orochimaru get so far off the expected path? Had he been influenced too much by me? You're cooperating with Orochimaru? Tsunade asked the moment she heard. Tsunade's face showed instant alarm. Jingi waved a hand to calm her. Relax. It's only animal experiments. Snakes, not forbidden human trials. I would never join Orochimaru in human experimentation. That's a relief, she said, breathing out. Animal experiments weren't banned. All villages conducted them because research advances through experimentation. Human trials, however, were off limits, absolutely forbidden. Jingi had Tsunade in his arms and eyed her with a teasing tilt. Why is it getting bigger again? Are you sure it won't affect your movement? Tsunade's expression turned into a face full of dark lines. Get lost, she snapped. You're the one affecting movement. On one hand, you like it big. On the other, you worry it'll slow you down. Tsunade had half a mind to punch him, but Jingi ducked away with practiced ease. I think Orochimaru's experiments are interesting, Jingi continued. If they work, Minato and Nawaki could get settled summoning animals. The slugs of Shikatsu Forest just don't fit them. You handle Minato's summons. Nawaki and Minato really do need suitable summoning animals as they grow. Tsunade agreed. A well-chosen summoning animal could be a tremendous asset, but finding the right one was tough. She had considered the problem for Nawaki. The slugs of Shikotsu Forest were unsuitable. Nawaki needed an offensive summoning or something that provided both offense and support. Her options were Mount Myoboku or Ryuchi Cave. The Ryuchi snakes were cold and hard to control. The toads of Mount Myoboku were easier to manage, but then she slapped her forehead and clenched her fists. Jingi, you arrange a summoning animal for Minato. As for Nawaki, I'll find Jiraiya. That scoundrel Jiraiya, Nawaki's own teacher, abandoned him and ran off to the land of rain, and he hasn't come back. When he returns, Granny is going to make him pay. To be fair, Jiraiya had been a bit outrageous in his behavior. Chapter 1a. Chio, you can't catch 3 big fish? To ignore his own disciples and instead take care of 3 war orphans. Jiraiya's priorities were beyond ordinary understanding. So much time had passed, yet he still showed no sign of returning. That fool might even make a 3-year promise. It would be laughable if the war between Konoha and the Sand dragged on, and Jiraiya still hadn't come back. All right, I'll prepare for Minato. As for Nawaki's summon, that'll be Jiraiya's responsibility. The toads of Mount Myoboku are perfect, Tsunade said. Jiraiya was only too happy to accept. Summoning beasts were difficult to raise. With Jiraiya handling it, it saved everyone a lot of trouble. If Jiraiya took charge, Nawaki's summon would almost certainly form a direct contract with Gamabunta or one of his brothers. If he were expected to raise a tadpole from scratch, let alone convincing Nawaki to do that, Tsunade would probably beat him herself. Are we really going to open a third front? Chiyo stared at the ceiling scroll in her hands, brows knitted. The last few days had piled one piece of bad news on top of another until her head felt fit to burst. First came reports of Konoha shinobi infiltrating the Land of Wind, wreaking havoc. Attacking villages was bad enough, but they had targeted oases, the very lifeblood of the Wind Country. Those northern oases might be recoverable with effort, but once destruction ran from north to south, recovery would be impossible. According to intelligence from the 3rd Kazekage, the oases in that sector had been destroyed by Hyuga Jingi from Konoha. To deal with the intruders, the Kazekage had sent forces from the frontline camp and the village. He even personally led the pursuit, accompanied by a large number of shinobi. It looked like they were poised to wipe the enemy out. The result left Chiyo stunned. The enemies had fled all the way into the Land of Bears, and only then did she learn that 2 Konoha elders had been leading the retaliatory mission. She was incredulous. If the team leader had not been the Kazekage himself, she would have been tempted to curse them as useless. Why hadn't this critical information been sent earlier? They had waited until the enemies had already crossed into the Land of Bears before transmitting word. What was the point other than incompetence? But what made her blood boil was this. The 2 biggest fish had escaped to the Land of Bears. Before she could finish digesting that, the message arrived that Hyuga Jingi himself had been part of the raid and had destroyed several oases. Chiyo nearly spat blood at the news. Kazekage-sama, what were you doing? 3 big fish, and not a single one caught. Hyuga Jingi, that unpredictable and dangerous individual, was one thing, but how had the 2 Konoha elders slipped through? Forces from both sides were now gathering in the Land of Bears, the region teetering on the brink of becoming a 3rd battlefield. Before she could even begin to resolve the chaos there, worse news came in. A small team returning from a mission reported they had been ambushed, attacked by countless puppets. The puppets moved independently, could self-destruct, and had captured Ye Kang, the village's genius, and a user of the village's scorch-release bloodline limit. All the signs pointed to Hyuga Jingi. Chiyo had deliberately not made public some of the intelligence from the Land of Rain. She feared it would shatter the morale of the village's shinobi, especially the puppeteers. If puppet masters learned that Jingi could create autonomous puppets that required no human operator, it would make them question their entire craft. Chiyo herself found the reports hard to believe. Then came a string of other troubling developments. Jingi had brazenly entered the Land of Rivers battlefield and captured Ye Kang, implying he had already made his way toward the Konoha camp, and that someone of Jingi's caliber would soon appear on the main front. The title, Godslayer, might sound grandiose, but the strength behind it could not be denied. Hanzo's power had been legendary. Few in the ninja world would claim they could kill that master of poisons. Yet Hanzo had fallen at Jingi's hands. That alone proved Jingi's power far exceeded that of a mere demigod. Chiyo's greatest fear was the puppets. If Jingi unleashed those autonomous puppets on the battlefield, the Sand Village would be forced into constant retreat. Days passed. The new type of puppets had already begun to show up on the battlefield, but Chiyo's anxiety did not ease. Their absence so far did not mean they would not appear in force. She felt the unbearable pressure of being threatened from both the front and the rear. Phew. Chiyo set the ceiling scroll on the table and rubbed her temples, exhaustion settling over her like a weight. The pressure on her chest felt like a mountain. Chiyo Elder, is that intelligence from the Kazekage? A voice asked. Beside her stood a young man about Jingi's age. He was Rasa, a new generation prodigy of the Sand Village on par with Ye Kang. A magnet release user, Rasa was the 3rd Kazekage's disciple and had been sent to study under Chiyo. Yes, Chiyo said softly. She let her hand fall and sighed. Kazekage-sama led forces to pursue the intruders from the land of wind, chasing them all the way into the land of bears. Konoha also dispatched a substantial force to intervene. So the Kazekage intends to draw more troops from the front line, Rasa said, immediately grasping the key point. The Kazekage wanted to press the advantage, pull forces away from the front line to crush Konoha's reinforcements, and pin those two elders down in the land of bears, deal Konoha a decisive blow there. It was a bold plan, but as Kazekage he had not fully accounted for the state of the land of rivers front. That was Chiyo's dilemma. She wanted to send reinforcements to support the Kazekage and wipe out the troublesome elders, Utatane Koharu and Homura Mitokado, in the land of bears. But could she afford to withdraw troops at will? She dared not. Among the 5 great shinobi countries, the Sand Village was weakest. Its economy and military were inferior to Konoha's. The village simply had far fewer shinobi, and their overall quality lagged behind Konoha. To make matters worse, the year-long conflict at the Land of Rain battlefield had already inflicted heavy losses on the Sand Village. Chiyo sat back, the weight of impossible choices pressing down on her. After the full-scale war erupted in the Land of Rivers, Tsunagakure was throwing every possible resource into the conflict. On that battlefield, the number of sand ninja already committed was not small, and Konoha would surely send even more. The Sand Village had neither numerical superiority nor better ninja quality, and its logistics lagged far behind Konoha's. Chiyo, Grandma Chiyo, was under immense pressure. She had already protested when the camp transferred a batch of shinobi away. Every transfer shrank Tsunagakure's defensive front. As that line retreated, Konoha could exploit the gap and steadily push forward. Small advantages would expand with time. Now the 3rd Kazekage wanted to send another group to reinforce the front, and Chiyo could barely contain her fury. But our defensive line has already started to shrink, she said. If we keep pulling people back, the pressure will only get worse. Rasa couldn't hide his alarm. If this continued, Konoha might push the front all the way into the land of wind. Once your battlefield moves into your own territory, it becomes a rout. It would devastate the village's morale. But their teacher didn't care about a shrinking front. He had repeatedly sent letters demanding reinforcements. Chiyo glanced at Rasa, closed her eyes, and managed only a bitter sigh. There were some things she couldn't explain to him, some problems she had to shoulder alone. Compared with Chiyo's turmoil, Orochimaru was in an unusually good mood. His long-awaited experiment could finally begin. Jingi had agreed to cooperate. And the fact that Tsunagakure's front line was being stretched thin meant the village had manpower problems he could exploit. With new intelligence from the land of bears, Orochimaru began ordering a carefully measured advance. If you, Sand Village, withdraw, then I will advance. An all-out war is not about small ambushes. It favors overall strength. And Orochimaru gambled that Tsunagakure's weakness would let him push them back toward the land of wind. Tsunade had left for the village, and Jingi had taken over many of her duties at the camp. With enough medical ninja in the unit, Jingi didn't need to handle every mundane task personally, which quietly eased his burden. The 3rd Hokage wants us to send a team up to the land of bears to support the 2 advisors, Jingi remarked. I refused. Orochimaru's smile twisted oddly. Jingi raised an eyebrow. Aren't you worried the Hokage will punish you for that? Both the 3rd Kazekage and the 3rd Hokage had insisted on ensuring the 2 advisors in the land of bears could return safely. The 3rd Hokage had not only ordered reinforcements from Konoha, but planned to transfer a group from the frontline camp as well. That order, however, had been effectively ignored at the camp. Orochimaru buried the sealing scroll, delayed, and eventually replied that he had been too busy to notice. Whether the advisors were injured or killed by the delay did not trouble him. Orochimaru wanted to stabilize the situation in the land of rivers and force the enemy back into the land of wind. Reinforcements at this point? Impossible. As long as Orochimaru remained in the command center, he would resist such demands. The lives of the 2 advisors mattered, but victory mattered more. He won't punish me, Orochimaru said with easy confidence. The battlefield situation is stable. We're on the offensive. As long as we don't fall into a trap, the enemy will keep retreating. And at a time like this, the 3rd Hokage won't throw me out. Tsunade wouldn't allow that either. he was certain he wouldn't be removed or even seriously questioned. He had a reasonable excuse to the Hokage, prioritizing victory over individual lives, and Tsunade's presence in the village worked in his favor. Jingi might make the third Hokage feel helpless, but he would not meddle in major decisions. Tsunade, however, took responsibility for the village and would object loudly if she thought something was wrong. If the third Hokage regretted taking on these three disciples, Tsunade, who argued directly, Orochimaru, who outwardly obeyed but refused in practice, and Jiraiya, who remained out of contact, it left him isolated. With Utatane Koharu and Homura Mitokado stuck in the land of bears, Hiruzen felt increasingly alone in Konoha. "Tsunade will back you," Jingi said. If something benefited Konoha, Tsunade would not oppose it. But if the third Hokage tried to push something harmful, she would step up to object. These matters were merely a small interlude for Jingi. Whether to obey the order or not was Orochimaru's decision, since he ran the camp. "By the way," Jingi added, shifting subjects, "when does your experiment start?" "Soon," Orochimaru replied, eyes bright. "At most a few days." Even as camp commander, Orochimaru carved out time for the experiments that fascinated him. Official duties? Shadow clones could handle much of the work. His true body only needed to oversee the day-to-day. In the land of bears, in a hidden valley, Utatane Koharu looked haggard. Her left hand was heavily bandaged. She stared at Homura Mitokado and asked weakly, "When will the reinforcements arrive?" Homura sighed when he saw her hand and pale face. Hiruzen sent word. "The order to dispatch reinforcements has been sent to the Land of Rivers camp. Considering the distance and detours, it'll take at least 2 days to get here." "Koharu, do we really have to stay here?" she asked again, desperation in her voice. Homura looked at her, hesitating to speak. Chapter 191, Utatane Koharu, Where are the reinforcements? According to the original plan, after meeting up with the village reinforcements, they would withdraw from the Land of Bears under their cover and return to Konoha. But the third Hokage's message that Jingi's mission had been completed successfully seemed to change Utatane Koharu's mind. She refused to go back to the village humiliated. Instead, she insisted they link up with the reinforcements and hold the third Kazekage and the Sand Village's backup forces in the Land of Bears. If the revenge mission couldn't be carried out perfectly, she argued, they could at least earn merit elsewhere. She wouldn't crawl home defeated and give Jingi something to laugh about. Homura Mitokado was stunned when she proposed it. He might have liked to pry open her skull to see which synapse had shorted out to make her say such reckless things. But in the end, he couldn't convince her. He was forced to agree. That decision led to a major engagement in which Koharu paid a heavy price. During their fight with the third Kazekage, her arm was nearly crushed by black iron sand. Had the rescue not arrived in time, her entire arm would have been pulverized. They managed to save it, but her left hand was almost crippled. In the remote Land of Bears, there was no chance for proper medical care. As a medical ninja herself, Koharu's injury was a disaster. Who could treat her properly out here? "You want to run back to the village looking like this?" Koharu glared at Homura, her face pale and drawn. Her expression was flat and cold enough to make him shiver. "Koharu, I'm not trying to contradict you," he began. "I just want to point out, what price are we willing to pay to tie down the third Kazekage? You and I together are not a match for the third Kazekage." He braced himself. Among the F4, no, among Tobirama's disciples, the strongest were the third Hokage and Uchiha Kagami, exceptions whose power was obvious. Next came Akimichi Torifu with his clan's secret techniques, then Danzo Shimura. At the bottom, in terms of battlefield might, were Homura and Koharu. Koharu's role as a medical ninja didn't automatically make her a frontline powerhouse like Tsunade. Confronting the Kazekage had cost her nearly a hand. The two of them had been chased and humiliated. If you wanted to pin an enemy down, you needed enough strength to do it. That was Homura's worry. Koharu was injured and weakened, and he could not take on the third Kazekage alone. The title, Strongest Kazekage, was earned. The third's power was genuinely overwhelming. "Why must we defeat the third Kazekage?" Koharu snapped. "As long as we remain in the Land of Bears, that old man will follow us. Once the reinforcements arrive, we'll have the numbers to contend with him." What could Homura say? All he could do now was hope the reinforcements showed up. He hadn't considered the possibility they might run into trouble. He trusted the third Hokage implicitly. If the third said reinforcements were coming, then they would come, no use second-guessing it. Elsewhere in the land of bears, the third Kazekage frowned as he stared at the sky from his temporary encampment. His mood was sour. Chiyo had effectively refused one of his orders, or at least only partly complied. She had sent fewer than 200 shinobi to support the operation, and her message made her reasoning clear. The sand village was stretched thin. The chaotic fighting on the rain battlefield had cost lives and supplies. The Land of Rain conflict was still not truly over, and a new full-scale war had erupted in the Land of Rivers. Men and material were scarce. The Kazekage could understand those constraints, but understanding did not equal acceptance. From his perspective, he was the Kazekage. Chiyo should have obeyed his command instead of sending a token force and hiding behind battlefield excuses. Kazekage-sama. A guard from the Kazekage's retinue hurried over and bowed. The Star Ninja Village has sent an inquiry demanding that our forces withdraw immediately from the Land of Bears. And, the Kazekage snapped, dismissive. He had no patience for the Star Village's complaints. They'd kept out of the fight until now. They didn't get to demand anything of the Sand Village. More important to him, though, was the report about Konoha. The Konoha operatives are hiding. The terrain is complicated. Our men are having extreme difficulty tracking them. The dense terrain and the constant traps had worn down Sand Village pursuit teams. The Konoha shinobi were masters of forest warfare, and even though the Land of Bears environment differed from Fire Country's woodlands, Konoha's skills translated better than the Sands. The Sandmen were hampered by unfamiliar ground and cunning ambushes. The Kazekage looked up at the canopy and muttered, "They're very good at choosing their positions. Keep sending men to pursue, gather every scrap of intelligence, pinpoint their location." His patience was threadbare. Every time scouts marked a spot, he led a detachment personally, only to discover a deception. Koharu and Homura were like foxes in the undergrowth, always disappearing and always baiting the sand forces. Konoha kept creating diversions. The Kazekage had been repeatedly outmaneuvered. It had been close once. He'd nearly captured Koharu and Homura, but a handful of Konoha shinobi had sacrificed themselves to allow Koharu to escape. Without that intervention, her injury might have been far worse than a crippled hand. 2 days passed. The reinforcements Chiyo had sent finally reached the Land of Bears. Back with Konoha's group, Koharu's irritation had grown. "Homura," she snapped. 2 days ago, you told me the reinforcements would arrive in 2 days. Where are they?" Chapter 192, Sarutobi Hiruzen. Why would I stand up my old partner? They had waited foolishly for 2 days, constantly sending people to create smoke screens to distract the third Kazekage, then received nothing. Reinforcements? They hadn't even seen a single sign. They should be arriving soon. We must trust Hiruzen. Don't you trust him? Homura Midokado's question rang in the tense air. Utatane Koharu calmed at the rhetorical query. The third Hokage had never gone back on his word. If he said he had sent reinforcements, then they had to be on their way. Perhaps they were delayed. They only needed to wait a little longer. Then we'll continue to wait. The waiting was agonizing, but Koharu had no other choice, unless she abandoned her ideals and withdrew from the Land of Bears. 2 days later, there was still no sign of help. The atmosphere around Koharu turned oppressively heavy. Even Homura hesitated to come near. They had been promised reinforcements in 2 days, but after 2 consecutive waits of 2 days, the third Hokage had seemingly stood them up. Thankfully, they had only been manufacturing smokescreens and had not thrown themselves at the enemy. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Why had Hiruzen stood us up? Homura couldn't understand. In fact, the third Hokage himself did not know why he'd been stood up. Sitting in the village, he was still waiting for news from the Land of Bears. The intelligence ninja responsible for sending updates had died while setting off the smoke bombs. With no way to relay their situation, Hiruzen could only wait in the dark. At an underground base in the Land of Rivers camp, Jingi, using Sage Chakra mode, was assisting Orochimaru with an experiment. Both of them had mostly forgotten the Land of Bears situation. Orochimaru, who would feign cooperation while acting otherwise, didn't care about the lives of the two elders. Jingi had already recalled his puppets. The terrain of the Land of Bears was too complex. Puppets in the sky would have difficulty pinpointing anyone in the forest. Watching Orochimaru combine Sage Chakra and Tenseigan Chakra in the experimental subject, Jingi found himself admiring the man. Orochimaru had run countless trials to obtain this batch of test subjects. Jingi recalled Orochimaru's earlier remark that hundreds of experiments had been necessary. Just thinking about that sent a chill across his scalp. If it took hundreds of trials to produce this iteration, how many had died in the process? Only Orochimaru knew. The man had even experimented on his own body. Fortunately, Orochimaru knew Jingi disliked such things and only performed self-experiments when alone. There's rejection. A small snake in one of the jars began to writhe, its slender body swelling until, bang, the jar exploded. Shards of glass and a spray of blood filled the immediate area. Orochimaru had prepared, though. A protective layer around the setup kept the worst of the shrapnel contained. He remained calm, picking up a notebook and quickly recording the process and reasons for failure. The subject absorbed Sage Chakra well, Orochimaru noted, but Jingi-kun, your chakra carries an unstable risk. Is that my fault? Jingi thought. You insisted natural energy alone was too conservative and pushed to add Sage Chakra, and now it's my chakra that's unstable? He suppressed his disgust at the bloody remains. This work was not for him. You can continue the later experiments on your own. I'm leaving. This place isn't for me. Jingi had his own laboratory in the Anbu base, built on earth and stone, nothing like Orochimaru's labs. If rules didn't forbid using corpses or living human subjects, he might not have minded for the sake of research. Then again, Orochimaru clearly would. Orochimaru only hummed in reply, absorbed in his notes. He hadn't even looked up. Jingi shook his head and left the underground base. He went to check on the prisoners of war, his first time visiting Ye Kang since her capture. He had already instructed the guards not to target her and to avoid any harsh interrogation techniques. In her solitary cell, Ye Kang sat with blank eyes, leaning against the wooden bars and staring up at the sky. Since waking as a captive, she had been unsettled, but the worst of the rumors had not come to pass. Her treatment, though restrictive, was better than many other prisoners. Sir. The on-duty ninja bowed quickly when he saw Jingi. You've worked hard. Jingi smiled and nodded, then pointed toward the cell. I've come to see the person inside. Sir, shall I patrol the area? The guard offered politely. Jingi nodded. The obedient guard left to patrol, and Jingi walked up to the cell alone. Noticing someone had come, Ye Kang blinked and looked down at him. Compared to when she had been captured, she appeared more disheveled, her long green hair tangled, her fair face smudged with dirt, her clothes rumpled and carrying a sour smell. The green apple cut was gone. She struggled to recall, and then fixed her gaze on Jingi. Who are you? She asked. Jingi had expected anger or curses. Instead, she asked his identity. He arched an eyebrow. Doesn't your sand village have any intelligence on me? Or did Chiyo block the information? He studied her. Then Ye Kang's eyes hardened. Hyuga Jingi, the one they call the God Slayer, the man who killed Hanzo of the Salamander on the Land of Rain battlefield. Was it you who ambushed me and brought me here? Her voice trembled with a sudden surge of emotion. Remop, Chapter 193, The Human Heart, Can't Stand Comparison. I guess so. Jingi shrugged and leaned against the pillar behind him. On the way to the camp I saw your squad, so I had one of my puppets grab you. As for your companions, you killed them. Ye Kang slammed her palm into the wooden pillar. It was thicker than her calf. She roared, eyes blazing. Why did you kill them? Why? Does anger make people lose their minds? Jingi fixed her with a serious look, then said mildly, I regret bringing you back a little. It seems you're not very bright. Do I look not very smart? Ye Kang shot back. As for why I captured you, Jingi paused, choosing his words. At first I thought your talent was real. You are a new generation genius of Sand Ninja Village, but now that estimate looks a bit exaggerated. I don't know who's got more natural talent, you or Rasa, but Rasa is definitely sharper. It was true. If Ye Kang hadn't been naive, she wouldn't have been lured to Mist Ninja Village by Rasa and ambushed, dying without ever understanding why. She had gone to represent her village alone, not once suspecting Rasa might seize the chance to eliminate her. The result had been obvious. She walked into an ambush and died without explanation. I'm not stupid, her face flushed. Being called a fool repeatedly was starting to unravel her composure. Really? Jingi said coolly. I don't believe you. Yi Kang's voice rang strong, but her expression betrayed her. The flush deepened until it looked bluish-purple. If this continued, she felt she might boil over. She knew the odds for prisoners of war were grim. Few survived. She didn't expect release. Even if Jingi let her go, back home she'd be treated like a suspect. Once tortured, many people break and betray. Since you captured me, do what you want. You don't have to humiliate me. If I killed you, wouldn't my capture be wasted? I'd have used up a puppet for nothing. Jingi squatted down, amused. You worry about your companions, but after my puppet knocked you out and dragged you off, they didn't even try to save you. They didn't dare chase us. I won't believe it. Ye Kang's words were defiant, but inside she couldn't be sure. Not having the ability to save her and not having the will to save her were two different things, and the thought gnawed at her. It's for the best you don't believe it. You'd be furious if you knew the truth. Jingi smiled and stopped talking. He turned to leave the cell, and when the duty ninja returned, he told him what to do. Keep a close eye on the prisoner in that cell. Give her good treatment. Put a bunch of enemies in the next cell and treat them badly. Frequently bring people to interrogate them. You can use some persuasive methods. Huh? The duty ninja blinked. Sir, that level of treatment. Give her the best. Jingi's tone left no room for argument. This, the ninja hesitated. Is there a problem? No problem. We'll provide the highest treatment. So Ye Kang would be treated like a privileged prisoner. The new arrivals would get the worst treatment. Frequent interrogations and even torture were explicitly allowed. The duty ninja recorded Jingi's orders and hurried to report them to his superior. The next day, Ye Kang found a group of Sand Village ninjas in the adjacent cell. Compared with her own cramped space, the neighboring cell was packed. The look on their faces was miserable. Ye Kang, why are you here? One of them, Ritsuro, stared in disbelief. They hadn't expected the village genius, Scorch Release Ye Kang, to be imprisoned, let alone in the neighboring cell. Senior Ritsuro, it's a long story, Ye Kang muttered, shifting awkwardly. Before more could be said, the duty ninja strode in, shouted for quiet, and began handing out rations. True to Jingi's instructions, the adjacent cell got only hard, dry rations. Ye Kang, by contrast, had meat and vegetables, bread, an actually balanced meal. The food might not have been gourmet, but it was far better than what most prisoners in the camp received. Ye Kang stared at her tray, bewildered. When had prisoners started getting such good food? Even if she was a special case, she shouldn't be fed like this. The sand ninjas in the next cell were more visibly upset. They were all prisoners. Why was Ye Kang in a separate cell, apparently not interrogated, and eating so well? Could Konoha be trying to win her over? Normal people would think that. Some prejudiced minds might even wonder, had she betrayed them? Despicable. A few mouths spat the thought aloud. Ye Kang felt a tremor of anger. She wasn't politically astute, but she wasn't stupid either. Jingi was deliberately showing the others her special treatment. A separate cell, no interrogation, high-standard food, over time that would seed suspicion and jealousy. Even if she never intended to betray her village, others would start to suspect and resent her. Please change my food. I want the same rations as everyone else. She told the duty ninja, desperately trying to stop the brewing resentment. Her request was ignored. The duty ninja didn't care whether she ate it or not. The orders had been given and the food delivered. If she refused the meal, she could simply starve. Chapter 194. What can you do to me with this blatant conspiracy? She was ignored. Ye Kang stared at the tray of food on the floor and looked away. To avoid arousing her comrade's suspicion, she refused to eat anything that looked like special treatment. Move aside, everyone. This one's for Lord Jingi's favored guest. Soon a duty ninja led a group to her cell, opened the door, and, much to Ye Kang's astonishment, began hauling things inside. They were all kinds of materials. Why move supplies into a prison cell? She frowned. What were the Konoha shinobi up to now? Step back, the duty ninja said coldly. He gave her a look that left no room for protest. Ye Kang swallowed her anger and moved aside. The Sand Village prisoners in the neighboring cells craned their necks to see. When Ye-Kang was ushered to the far side, several Konoha men set to work. Under the watchful eyes of many onlookers, they built a separate partition, set up a large wooden tub, and, outrageously, brought in a wooden bed complete with bedding. When they finished, the duty ninja announced to Ye-Kang, "Lord Jingi ordered that although you're a prisoner of war, you are a woman. He had a simple restroom set aside for you so you can wash. Someone will bring hot water every afternoon so you can bathe." He snorted and swaggered off. It was over. Seeing the cell transformed, Ye-Kang felt her heart sink. She was a ninja, but that didn't change the fact she was a woman. She had been dreading having to take care of certain needs in the open, and now Konoha had solved that problem for her, on their terms. But she couldn't be happy. The prisoners from her own village in the next cells were staring, every face a witness. Refuse the food, she could. Refuse the bed and quilts, she could. But could she refuse the restroom? Not using it meant relieving herself within sight of her fellow shinobi. Could she, a woman, endure that humiliation? Using it would look, to everyone watching, like she was taking Konoha's comfort and betraying her village. It was an obvious ploy. Even knowing it was a setup, she felt trapped, forced to choose which humiliation to accept. "You! Come out here!" After the evening meal, the guards scolded her, and she still refused the special food. The guards did not indulge her. "Eat if you want, or starve if you don't," they told her flatly. As the night wore on, the duty ninja dragged someone from the interrogation department into the corridor beside her cell and began questioning him. The interrogation was brutal. Screams and pleading floated through the bars. Ye-Kang shut her eyes and kept silent. She didn't join the others in cursing. She knew Konoha's purpose. The more the prisoners raged, the worse the fate of the person under interrogation. "Sir, Ye-Kang refused both meals today and hasn't used any of the bedding," the duty ninja reported later. As usual," Jingi replied, setting down his book. He waved the man away. This was only the first day. He wanted to see how long she could hold out. Skipping a meal or two wasn't fatal, but going a whole day without being able to use the restroom was another matter. Previously, by Jingi's orders, the guards kept their distance long enough for her to use straw and branches to cover herself. Now the cells were full, and the guards stood by the bars, watching. Refusing food or a bed was one thing, refusing a restroom was another. It felt like training a hawk, testing how much she could be pushed. Jingi chuckled softly. Taking Tsunade's shift hadn't been so boring after all. Capturing Ye-Kang had been the right decision. At least she gave him something to do. Heh. He was amused by the whole petty conspiracy. "Something to celebrate?" Orochimaru's voice drifted from outside the window. Before Jingi could look up, Orochimaru pushed the door open and stepped in carrying a tray of steaming grilled meat. "Oh, is that Orochimaru? Decided to leave the lab?" Jingi asked with mild surprise. Orochimaru never came out unless necessary, his main body always in the lab, his clones handling the rest. For him to appear in person was unusual, and to bring food was rarer still. The grilled meat smelled delicious. Tsunade had been wrong. Orochimaru's cooking could be quite good when he bothered. "The little ones are doing well," Orochimaru said, pleased. The experiment had gone smoothly, which put him in a good mood. The meat was evidence. Eating food the serpent-like scientist had prepared in person was almost unheard of. "Then I look forward to it." Jingi's eyes flicked to the tray, and he reached for a fork. He paused mid-motion, frowning slightly. "What kind of meat is this?" With anyone else, Jingi wouldn't have asked, but Orochimaru was unpredictable. Jingi did not want to take a bite of something strange. Since Jingi-kun likes venison, these are wild deer, specially hunted in the forest by the command center guards, Orochimaru said with a smile, as if to reassure him that the meat was ordinary and safe. Chapter 195. When you stare into the abyss is also staring at you. That's more like it. Jingi-kun prodded a small piece with his fork, confirmed it was venison, then produced a clean kunai and sliced the meat. Tsunade's assessment had been accurate. Orochimaru's grilled meat did taste good. As he chewed, Jingi-kun asked casually, "How long does it take to cultivate a summoning beast?" Orochimaru, who had also started eating, paused at the question. "It'll probably take a few months. I need to make sure the experimental subject's growth is stable and moving in the right direction. Jingi-kun nodded and didn't press. When it came to experiments, Orochimaru was reliable, twisted in mind maybe, but credible. With Jiraiya, he'd be more skeptical. By the way, how's that prodigy you brought back? Not bad. We're still testing her, but the chances of her defecting from the sand are high. Worth cultivating? Orochimaru looked up in surprise. He knew how picky Jingi-kun could be. Talents others praised rarely impressed him. Only Minato Namikaze had pierced that indifference. Nawaki was there because of Tsunade. Is Ye-Kang worth the investment? Jingi-kun considered. She's okay, probably similar to Nawaki. Scorch release is rare, and its potential ceiling isn't low. There's another reason. What reason? Orochimaru's curiosity sharpened. She's pretty. Silence fell as Orochimaru's hopeful smile froze. Beauty was a deciding factor? The thought made him blink. In his view, whether a woman was pretty was irrelevant. He didn't share Jiraiya's enthusiasms. He preferred experiments and the pursuit of immortality to such distractions. Then suddenly, Orochimaru asked, Jingi, which matters more to a living thing, the body or the soul? The question was odd, and Jingi-kun took a moment. He set down his fork and wiped his mouth. It doesn't mean much to me. A beautiful body is important, but an interesting soul is indispensable. Orochimaru frowned. Can we even have a normal conversation? He tried again. Birth, aging, illness, death, those are natural links in the cycle. Some beings just live longer. Remember this, Orochimaru. When you gaze into the abyss also gazes into you. Stopping Orochimaru from chasing immortality was pointless. He was already well along that path, and his snake-like pupils were proof. It was a personal obsession, and Jingi-kun had no intention of interfering so long as Orochimaru didn't threaten him or his people. He'd rather ignore it than try to dissuade him. I'm full, Jingi-kun said, patting his belly. I enjoyed the late-night meal. I'm not interested in your research. If Orochimaru tried to rope him into strange experiments, Jingi-kun thought he wouldn't hesitate to slap him down. Play in your own sandbox. Don't drag me in. Satisfied, he added. Well then, see you tomorrow. Orochimaru collected the tray and left. He hadn't learned everything he wanted, but Jingi-kun's neutrality was enough. Ideally, he'd prefer Jingi-kun as an ally and partner in experiments, but if Jingi-kun refused, the next best thing was tacit acceptance. As long as Tsunade didn't interfere and Jingi-kun remained stable, Orochimaru could quietly continue his work without drawing the Anbu or causing trouble. Far away in the land of bears, a tense atmosphere had settled over the team. Utatane Koharu sat with her left hand bandaged, her expression grim. Beside her, Homura Mitokado looked equally worn. Both felt used. Where were the reinforcements they had been promised? 2 days had turned into another 2, and they'd been circling the land of bears, dragging the third Kazekage along while waiting for backup that never came. No reinforcements, and our supplies are almost gone, Koharu murmured. That was the real problem. Food could be scavenged. The forest was full of prey, but ninja tools and other supplies were another matter. They'd exhausted everything usable to keep the third Kazekage under control. The third Hokage's promise had become an empty word. Koharu laughed then, a little too sharp, and Homura felt a chill. I was wrong, Koharu said, voice brittle. I shouldn't have trusted Hiruzen. He disappointed me, Homura admitted. The realization froze Koharu to the core. The cruel truth settled over them both. They had been abandoned. Chapter 196, Jingi. How did the pot become mine? She felt ridiculous, like a clown, dancing around in the land of bears, stalling the third Kazekage, imagining reinforcements arriving at any moment, and then teaching the Kazekage a lesson. She wanted everyone to know that Utatane Koharu wasn't someone to be trifled with. What did she get instead? She had been stood up by the third Hokage. Koharu didn't know if something unexpected had happened in the village. All she knew was that the promise of backup never came. And because of it, she'd lost a hand. Missing the optimal treatment window meant that even if she got back to the village, restoring the hand would be difficult. She might be crippled, able to use only one hand. Losing a hand was a devastating blow for a medical nine. Koharu fell silent, stunned. Homura Mitokado looked at her, hesitated, opened his mouth several times, and finally said something that sounded hollow even to his own ears. Maybe Hiruzen ran into trouble, Maybe others opposed him, and he couldn't send help. Bullshit, Koharu snapped. Who could stop him? He's the Hokage. If he ordered reinforcements to the frontline camp, Orochimaru wouldn't dare disobey. Maybe Orochimaru wouldn't, Homura said with a bitter smile, but someone else might. He shook his head. There was a thrum of truth in it. Tsunade seemed to be in the camp. If she objected strongly, even if Orochimaru was willing to spare forces, they might not be able to go. Tsunade? Koharu's face darkened. Anger flared behind her eyes as if flames might leap out. Seeing her expression twist, Homura spoke quickly, worried. Koharu, maybe it's not what we imagine. Let's withdraw. Leave some people behind to stall them, and we can make it back to the village. Once we're back, everything will become clear. Homura didn't know whether Tsunade was blocking the reinforcements. He could only hope some accident had occurred. If it turned out reinforcements had been deliberately withheld, it would certainly lead to open hostility between the two sides. Let's retreat, he urged. Koharu no longer cared about the mission or the third Kazekage. All she wanted was to get back to the village and demand answers from the third Hokage. What had happened, and where were the promised reinforcements? But retreat wasn't simple. After pursuing them this long, the third Kazekage wouldn't easily let two Konoha elders slip away. Fortunately, Koharu and Homura had prepared for such a contingency. They would leave a few Konoha shinobi behind to act as a rearguard, create smoke and commotion, draw the enemy's attention, buying Homura and Koharu the chance to withdraw. Back in Konoha, Tsunade finally returned after a long absence. To her relief, everything at home seemed normal. Kushina was going to school obediently, sometimes strolling with her little sisters, and otherwise staying home like she had been told. She had followed Jingi's instructions to the letter. Nawaki, too, had stayed out of trouble, training hard every day and steadily getting stronger. How rare, Tsunade said, half amused. You're actually being so well behaved. She felt a little unreal as she looked at the two of them. Minato had always been obedient, sure, he wouldn't get into mischief. But these two troublemakers, Tsunade gave them a suspicious look. Are you two acting strange? Am I that hard to obey? Kushina pouted, wrapped her small hands around Tsunade's arm, and said with an exaggerated, innocent look, Jingi told us when he left the village, especially me. He said that during the war, the enemy might target me, so I was to go only to school and the shopping street and come straight home after school. He told me the same, Nawaki added. He also said there are puppets and Ambu protecting us. Nawaki glanced at his sister, exasperated. Can't you trust me a little? I'm your younger brother, no love left, he thought teasingly. Still, despite everything, Jingi had remained reliable. Chapter 197, The Opportunity Has Come. Tsunade ignored Nawaki's sulk and scooped Kushina into her arms, planting two emphatic kisses on the little girl's cheeks. Kushina squirmed in disgust, wiping her face with the back of her hand. You've all been so good lately. Big sister's treating you. Today we're going out for barbecue. Minato, you should come too. Tsunade had finally saved up a little money and wanted to spoil them. To her surprise, Nawaki grumbled and shook his head. Kushina looked unenthused. Minato offered an awkward smile. Treating them to barbecue should have delighted everyone. What else could be better? Granny wasn't as skilled a cook as Jingi, after all. Kushina gave a resigned sigh. I'm tired of it. Nawaki echoed her. Yeah, let's just wait for Minato to cook. Tsunade blinked. What? After Jingi left, the three kids had trouble with meals and had started eating out all the time, with Kushina, being a little heiress, picking up the tab. They'd tried every famous barbecue place in the village. Now they'd had so much of it they couldn't stand the sight of charcoal and skewers. Fortunately, Minato's cooking had improved. It wasn't hot cuisine, but it was more than passable. When they didn't eat out, Minato took over the kitchen. Kushina paid for groceries, and Nawaki ran errands and helped where he could. Fine, then don't eat, Tsunade snapped, hands on her hips, more hurt than angry. She'd wanted to do something nice for them. Instead, they turned up their noses. She felt almost affronted. Was there no justice left? Still, she couldn't realistically expect to cook every meal herself, so she swallowed her pride and set her hopes on Minato. When she did treat, she wasn't stingy, but relying on her to cook was asking too much. That evening, Tsunade ate Minato's food and praised him repeatedly, that partly to save face. Being an adult and depending on a kid for meals embarrassed her. Between compliments, she remembered, "Oh, right, your teacher has started preparing a summoning beast for you. When he gets back, you should be able to sign the contract. Practice summoning jutsu when you can. There's a sealing scroll at home. Ask Nawaki for it." At the mention of a summoning beast, the three kids sat up. Kushina piped eagerly, "Tsunade ni, what about me? Do I get one too?" Tsunade shook her head. "This summoning beast isn't suitable for you." Kushina pouted. "What about me? What about me? If it's not for Kushina, it must be fine for me." Nawaki stood and pointed at himself. "If it's good for Minato, it should be good for me too." Tsunade gave him a sympathetic shake of the head. "Jingi wanted to prepare one for you originally, but I said no. Wait for Jiraiya to return and contract directly with a toad from Mount Miobaku. That'll help if you ever train in Sage Mode." She left the reason unsaid. Nawaki and Minato hadn't been tested yet, and Tsunade couldn't bear to raise their hopes only to disappoint them if they lacked the talent. "Why not?" Nawaki's voice shot up several octaves. "I don't like toads, and I don't like Jiraiya either." Tsunade couldn't help teasing. "Is that so? Who was it that used to chase after Jiraiya whenever he had time? Who followed him and copied everything he did?" Nawaki flushed crimson. "That wasn't me, was it, Minato?" Kushina burst out laughing, and even Minato grinned. Tsunade's mocking set Nawaki squirming. Bring up someone's embarrassing youth, and they'd turn beet red. He thumped the table and protested loudly. "That was then. I don't like Jiraiya anymore. I don't like any toads, and I'm not signing any contract with one." Tsunade rolled her eyes. "Bratty kids, spoil them, and they think you're targeting them." Nawaki could fret about Jiraiya when the man actually returned. Far away in the underground base in the Land of Rain, Jiraiya sneezed several times and grinned. "Odd, somebody talking about me?" Konan hurried over, worried. "Teacher, you keep sneezing. Are you sick?" Her concern warmed Jiraiya. He ruffled the little girl's hair and preened. "Sick? Never. Your teacher, Jiraiya, is Konoha's strongest toad sage. I don't get sick. By the way, have you learned the ninjutsu I taught you?" he asked. Konan beamed. "I learned it. Yahiko is clumsy. He hasn't got it yet." "Konan," Yahiko protested, embarrassed but not daring to scold her. He stomped his feet and defended himself loudly. Nagato, his long hair still obscuring his eyes, stood quietly to the side. Jiraiya sighed, watching the three grow a little taller each day. He wondered how Nawaki was faring. Jingi was keeping an eye on him, so there shouldn't be problems, but still the thought made Jiraiya's head throb. Would Nawaki forgive him when he returned to Konoha? The nagging doubt lingered. Back in Konoha, an inquiry letter requesting rescue had been sent to the frontline camp. When it reached Orochimaru, he tossed it aside without a second thought. This was a dire moment in the war. He couldn't spare a squad to rescue a pair of troublesome old shinobi. But Orochimaru wasn't just dismissive, he was calculating. He'd been watching the battlefield situation closely. The Sand Village had indeed drawn a number of troops away, and enemy numbers at the front had noticeably thinned. Could this be an opening? If the Sand had shifted forces or committed to reinforcements elsewhere, the situation might present an opportunity Orochimaru had long waited for. He sought out Jingi and laid out his reasoning. The Sand Village has pulled quite a few forces, but it hasn't significantly altered the war's balance. The real factor is the weather. Winter is coming. Sand's supply lines will suffer. Transport will be harder. Jingi, who had been monitoring the sand camp with puppets, listened as Orochimaru unspooled his plan. The puppets had given Jingi a clear picture of troop movements and logistics, information that might turn a tossed-aside letter into a real chance. The opportunity had come. Does Konoha have supply problems? Yes, but not nearly as severe as the Sand Village. Konoha's foundation is here in the Land of Fire, and the country's resources are no joke. Once the daimyo is appeased, Konoha can requisition supplies from across the Land of Fire for the war effort, and the daimyo isn't likely to refuse. The outcome of the war affects him too. If Konoha wins, he gains face and favors. Besides, Konoha isn't taking those supplies for free. If the Land of Fire's daimyo supports Konoha, could the Land of Wind's daimyo do the same for the Sand Village? Unlikely. The Land of Wind can't match that level of support. Add the Wind Country's harsh environment and tightening supplies, and with winter coming, the strain on transport will only double. so the inherent advantage has swung to our side. Orochimaru spread a map and jabbed at it with a finger. Compared to Tsunagakure, our logistics are easier and our war potential is higher. Sand's already showing signs of strain. Troops and supplies are nearly depleted. Then what do you want to do? Jingi asked. Weakness didn't mean the Sand Village would fall overnight. At most, their front would keep shrinking, getting pushed back steadily. Orochimaru's smile faded. He grew serious and with a pleading tone turned to Jingi. I need your help. Specifically, I need your puppets. I remember you still have a batch I made. Those puppets should be used as consumables. Jingi had developed new materials for making puppets. Orochimaru had heard, though the exact components were unknown. With those new materials, and given Jingi's distaste for using ninja corpses, those older puppets could be treated as expendables. You really are something. Putting your plans on me, Jingi said dryly. If disposable puppets hit the battlefield, they could deliver a fatal blow to Tsunagakure's puppet corps. Even if they didn't utterly crush the Sand Village, they could inflict terrible losses. Orochimaru's smile returned, confident. Give me 300 puppets. I can force the front back into the Land of Wind. We'll try to break this full-scale war before the new year and turn it into a localized conflict, he continued. If the front was driven into the Land of Wind, the large-scale campaign in the Land of Rivers would collapse. Tsunagakure would suffer greatly, and the fighting that followed would be confined to the Land of Wind. Orochimaru's plan was cunning and dirty. Jingi knew exactly what that meant. Fine, take them. Don't give me that look. Jingi sighed, unable to resist a wry laugh, and produced a sealing scroll, tossing it to Orochimaru. Use this sealing scroll when you need them. These puppets will obey your commands. They were consumables, after all. Since Orochimaru asked, Jingi might as well give Sand Village and the rest of the ninja world a shock. He only hoped it wouldn't completely destroy the Sand's puppet shinobi's sense of the ninja way in one stroke. Puppets that didn't need live control were powerful, and they would self-destruct when destroyed. Once that fact was known, it would be devastating to Tsunagakure's traditional puppet tactics. Orochimaru clutched the scroll. This battle will shake the whole ninja world. Jingi-kun, you'll be famous again. No thanks. Jingi waved him off. The God Slayer title was embarrassing enough. Don't come up with some new ridiculous one, like your Konoha Great White Snake. Those 5 words shut Orochimaru down instantly. He'd been longing to strangle whoever coined that title. I'll wait for your good news. Jingi added, making a point of staying out of the fighting. He wanted to remain safely at the camp overseeing the medical department and leave the rest to Orochimaru. Orochimaru looked startled. You don't mean you expect me to go to the battlefield, do you? You're not sending me out there, right? Jingi leaned back, half amused and half exasperated. The thought of going to the front made him itch to slap someone. No, I'm not asking you to go to the front, Orochimaru hurried to clarify. I just want you to control these puppets so they can decimate the enemy. Once they do, I'll launch the full-scale attack and push their line back into the Land of Wind. Is there a difference? Jingi drawled. Controlling puppets from a safe distance or being on the battlefield, that's pretty much the same in the eyes of the Hokage office. The more I show, the more the office will fuss. That may be true, Orochimaru said, smiling. But why refuse achievements within reach? I'll publicize your accomplishments in the camp and inform the daimyo. With the daimyo's backing, the third Hokage can be angry, but he won't dare move against you. Sometimes whether we make a stand or stay quiet isn't up to us, he added. If we're going to be disliked regardless, we might as well build as much prestige as possible, make them cautious. Jingi looked at him with a smirk. You really are your teacher's disciple. Orochimaru took the barb in stride. Other students try to protect their teacher. He seemed determined to dig his teacher into trouble. From Orochimaru's point of view, it was the third Hokage who had been dishonest first, always manipulating him, openly and behind the scenes. So why should Orochimaru play fair? Chapter 199. Orochimaru, don't make any noise. I have someone else for the raid. One needed to understand that Orochimaru was not like Jiraiya, who could just scratch his head and smile even when targeted. Orochimaru was a snake. If you attacked him, he would bite back. All right, Jingi said. Since you, Orochimaru, want to scheme against our teacher, I'll play along. You deal with the consequences. I'll take whatever rewards come from it. No problem. Orochimaru smiled with satisfaction. Helping Jingi meant helping himself. Jingi could accumulate merits and prestige. Orochimaru could too. If he could avoid going up against the other members of F4, he would. But someone was always picking at him, never giving him an easy time. If that was the case, he wouldn't be polite. After leaving Jingi, Orochimaru returned to the command center and immediately ordered all active squads on the battlefield to return to the frontline camp. If they were going to make a decisive move, they needed concentrated strength. With the Sand Village's camp in chaos, they would strike hard and try to push them back into the Land of Wind in one sweep. Orders were passed down. Squads on missions diverted back to camp. As more units returned, the frontline camp grew livelier than usual. When all the squads that could come had arrived, a combat briefing targeting the Sand Village began in the command center. Jingi attended. When he arrived, the room was already full. Normally only elite squad captains, Jonin level, or those with special status were invited to these meetings. Without Jonin rank or a special identity, these briefings typically didn't concern you. Looks like I'm a bit late, Jingi muttered. Not at all, Orochimaru said from the head of the table with a welcoming smile, then motioned for Jingi to take a seat at the front. Jingi sat and scanned the room. He recognized very few faces, a few familiar, most not. He would have to review the village's ninja rosters when he returned. Jonin-level ninja should be well known. Right now, he barely knew who half of them were. Everyone, Orochimaru began, looking around the assembled captains and leaders. Today's briefing concerns a concentrated operation by the village. I expect everyone to be alert. This is very important. He unrolled a map and pointed with a stick to a red mark. The green marks are our front lines. The red marks show the enemy's shrinking defensive positions. Lord Orochimaru, do you mean the enemy's defenses are contracting? A Jonin asked. Yes. Orochimaru pointed to a dotted red line. Recently, their front lines started to retract from here. Intelligence indicates our forces carried out a retaliatory mission inside the Land of Wind and successfully drew their attention away. The third Kazekage led a large force into the Land of Bears, and many troops were pulled from their battlefield positions. Their forces are now thinner than ours, so their lines are shrinking. So we're going to launch a large-scale attack? Another Jonin asked. Orochimaru smiled and flicked the pointer. Partly, we will launch a large-scale attack, but it must be timed to exploit internal chaos inside the enemy ranks. Think of it as a surprise attack. Many of the assembled looked puzzled. Some of the older ninja here excelled at combat, not at precise vocabulary. The Ninja Academy focused on the fundamentals. Hand signs, tactical basics, and cultural or literary education often took a back seat. As a result, terms left some baffled. Orochimaru's brow tightened at the blank stares. Jingi's face twitched slightly. At this point, many Chunin and even some Jonin had earned their rank by strength alone. The written and theoretical parts of the exams mattered less. Non-academic knowledge among veteran ninja could be spotty. It wasn't unheard of for older or family-trained ninja to struggle with scrolls or formal phrasing. To put it simply, Orochimaru continued, we plan a surprise attack to throw their camp into chaos. Once they're disorganized, we will launch a full-scale offensive, crush them, and drive them back into the Land of Wind. Understood? Now they understood. A murmur rippled through the room. Lord Orochimaru, provoking internal chaos in the enemy won't be easy, someone said. No, Orochimaru agreed. The most effective way is to attack their frontline camp directly. That will create the disorder we need. Attack the Sand Village's frontline camp? Are you insane? Another voice snapped. Shut up, muttered someone else. That's what Orochimaru proposed, not you. Everyone, stop. Orochimaru tapped the table twice to restore order. When the room quieted, he continued in a measured voice. I've already planned the surprise attack. Your job is to follow orders, move your units to the positions I assign, and attack when I signal. If the surprise succeeds, push forward with your squads. Doable? The captains exchanged wary looks. Pulling off a surprise strike against an enemy frontline camp would be extremely difficult. Infiltrating such a camp was dangerous enough, Mounting a surprise attack that disturbed their entire defense was a far greater challenge. Small teams risked being ineffective. Too many attackers would be detected long before they reached the camp. No one should underestimate the enemy's sensor ninja. Both Konoha and the Sand Village kept specialized sensor operatives at the frontline camps, their task to detect and report any approaching threat. That layer of defense alone made the plan risky, but without creating havoc inside the enemy camp first, a full assault would be futile. Chapter 200. It's dark and windy at night, so it's easy to sneak attack. The man beside me is Hyuga Jingi, the Anbu's deputy commander. Many of you here know him. He will lead the surprise attack mission. Our part is a full-scale assault. After outlining the plan, Orochimaru introduced Jingi. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Lord Jingi is in charge of the surprise attack? Isn't that too dangerous? He's a medical ninja. Idiot, Orochimaru replied. God Slayer isn't only a medical ninja. He's a powerful shinobi. If he's been assigned the covert raid, he'll get it done. Those who didn't know Jingi thought Orochimaru was joking. A medical ninja leading such a dangerous mission? But the Jonin's objections were dismissed before they finished forming. Wasn't it obvious that this man was a strong fighter hiding behind the guise of a medical ninja? And who said a medical ninja had to be weak? If you want to test it, go tell Tsunade Hime. The real question was whether Tsunade would even be capable of such a raid. Seeing the skepticism around him, Jingi didn't bother to argue. He simply said, "How to infiltrate the enemy camp is my responsibility. Your job is to prepare for the full-scale assault. Everyone, get ready. Some things, unless achieved, never silence the critics. Even if you succeed, people will still talk. Human nature is like that. The best response is often silence. Don't argue. Don't engage. Just do your job." Orochimaru understood that. Many present were reluctant, but with Orochimaru, the camp's commander, giving the order, there was no choice but to obey. Once the units dispersed, Jingi muttered irritably, "I've learned nothing good ever comes of getting involved with you, Orochimaru. I'm beginning to regret agreeing to this. What you get out of it is more than I do." "Jingi-kun, it's mutual benefit," Orochimaru said with a faint smile. "I need credit, and so do you. I need reputation, and so do you. Only my need is more urgent. Since I refuse to obey the third Hokage's order, I have to produce results to justify that decision. You feel the same. Even if the refusal was my choice alone, will the third Hokage and the others believe that?" Jingi snapped. "You can say I had nothing to do with it, but who would take your word? Maybe Tsunade would, but the rest of the Sannin." Jingi's face darkened. A black mark had been painted on him by association, whether he liked it or not. Since Orochimaru had grown close to him, reckless actions had followed. It was easy to assume collusion. Jingi cursed inwardly, annoyed, but he could not deny the logic. Go to hell. Defying orders isn't my doing. Whether others believe that's their problem. He gave Orochimaru a curt look and left. He resolved to keep his distance from the snake from now on, lest he be drawn into another scheme. Orochimaru smiled quietly. The third Hokage's order had, in a way, acted like a catalyst for what he needed. His only regret was Jingi's increased wariness. The command from headquarters arrived. The camp's combat units moved out and, under Orochimaru's orders, took up positions across the battlefield, awaiting the attack signal. One day later, in the early morning between 3 and 4 o'clock, when people are most drowsy, even Night Watch Nin would feel the pull of sleep. A puppet crow, almost invisible in the darkness, flew toward the Sand Village camp carrying a sealing scroll. "A bird?" A sensor ninja on duty murmured. He noticed the movement in the sky and checked it thoroughly, then relaxed. A bird flying overhead at high altitude wasn't unusual. It showed no signs of descending. He felt reassured. What he didn't expect was that, just as the bird was about to pass over the camp, it dropped the sealing scroll and darted away. The scroll plummeted through the night toward the Sand Village camp. "What's that?" The sensor ninja, now alarmed, called out. "Something's falling from high up. Go check it out." Before anyone could get to the landing site, the sealing scroll shattered midair, breaking into a storm of parchment that drifted down like confetti. As the sheets of paper spread, hundreds of figures detached from the falling debris and descended, puppets silently gliding into the camp. "No!" the sensor ninja shouted. "Enemy attack!" Too late. The puppets landed and immediately engaged the nearest targets. The stillness of the camp was ripped apart by the sounds of struggle and screams. It was instantaneous, a single explosive panic sweeping through the camp. Remotely controlled, the puppets attacked anything in sight. A portion split off and sped toward the surrounding buildings, tents and houses alike. As each puppet approached, it detonated on contact. Boom, boom, boom. Deafening explosions tore across the camp. The chaos escalated by degrees in seconds. Many Sand Village shinobi, still asleep, were blown away before they had time to react. Within minutes, the camp had become utter bedlam. Those who had woken were dazed. The roar of explosions and the cries of comrades echoed relentlessly. Chiyo, awakened by the commotion, scrambled into her clothes, alarm tracing every line of her face.